Okay, we're continuing our learning in the Zchus of Naftali Falek by Rav Tzvi Abba Levi. We're on Daf Beis, Amid Beis, right in the middle. If anybody has an Oscroll Gemaras in the following, we're on page 2b2. And the Gemara is still continuing with the analysis of the first Mishnah. So the Gemara says the following. Ihava Kosav, if the verse, we're talking about the verse that's written in the Megillah. Ihava Kosav, es Yom Arba Sov Chamisha Asar, if the verse in the Megillah would have written the 14th day and the 15th day, without the word Ace intervening between the 14th and the 15th, then it would convey Kiddush Mart, as you suggested, that walled cities celebrate Purim on both the 14th and 15th. Hashta Dichsiv Es Yom Arba Sami Es Yom Chamishos Hawa. However, now that is written the 14th day and the 15th day with the word Es between the 14th and the 15th. As a pasuk, the Es comes and interposes between the two dates to teach that they are not celebrated together. Hani ba'arba asar v'hani b'chamisha asar. Rather, these unwalled cities celebrate on the 14th, and those walled cities celebrate on the 15th. The Gemara poses yet another challenge to the scriptural derivation presented above. The Ema Perazim Bi'arbisar. But one could say that unwalled cities celebrate Purim on the 14th. Mukafin and the residents of walled cities may choose when to celebrate Purim. Ibo Barbesar. If they want, they can celebrate on the 14th. Ibai Bachamisar. And if they want, they can celebrate on the 15th. They have a choice. So that's what the Gemara is suggesting now. Now the Gemara is going to reject this possibility. Omar Korah Bismanehem. The verse says, in their times, which teaches that Zemano shall zeh velo Zemano shall zeh. The time for this walled cities is unlike the time for the other unwalled cities. That means to say, walled and unwalled cities must celebrate Purim on separate days. Consequently, the time designated for walled cities cannot include the 14th, inasmuch as that is the day when Purim is celebrated in unwalled cities. The Gemara suggests yet another possibility. The aim of the place, but one could say that in walled cities, Purim is celebrated on the 13th of Adar, not the 14th, but the 13th. What basis exists for assuming that walled cities celebrate Purim on the 15th as opposed to the 13th? Gemara answers B'Shushan. Presumably, walled cities celebrate Purim on the same day as the city of Shushan. Since the verse is given no date for walled cities, we assume that they celebrate Purim on the 15th, the day when the residents of Shushan celebrated after defeating their enemies. And we are all reminded that the city of Shushan was a walled city, and that's the connection of walled to unwalled, and that's the connection of walled to the 15th, the date of the 15th. And this is all recorded in Megillah Esther. Okay, the verse from which we derive that the date for unwalled cities is the 14th, and for walled cities is the 15th, discusses the festive aspects of Purim, not the reading of the Megillah. The Gemara therefore asks how we know that the Megillah reading also takes place on these days. Eshkechan Asiya, we find that the celebration of the Purim festivities, the feast and the merriment, takes place in unwalled cities on the 14th, and in walled cities on the 15th. Zechiran Minolan. But from where do we know that the commemoration of the Purim miracle, the reading of the Megillah, is also held on these days? The Gemara answers Amar Korah, V'hayamim ha'eleh niskarim v'nasim. The verse states, these days shall be commemorated and celebrated. Iskash, Zechira L'asiya. By the juxtaposition of one to the other, commemoration is compared to celebration. This teaches that the activities of commemoration take place on the same day as the activities of celebration. And when we talk about celebration, we're talking about the Suda and also Matanos L'Avyonim, which we're going to get to soon. The Mishnah taught that cities must have been walled at the time of Yeshua. To read the Megillah on the 15th, the Gemara cites a dissenting view. Masnisin de Loki Hayitana. Our Mishnah is not in accordance with the opinion of this Tana. It's Tana because we learned in a Brisa, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha Omer, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha, another Tana says, Kerachin Hamukofin Choma Mimos Achashverosh Korin Mechamisha Asar. residents of cities that were surrounded by walls at the time of Achashverosh read the Megillah on the 15th. So first of all, you have a difference here. Now we're talking about walled cities now we're talking about cities that were walled during the time of Achashverosh, not talking about cities that were walled during the time of Yoshua ben Nun. So the Gemara asks, my time of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha. What is Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha's reason for determining the status of a city by the existence of the wall at the time of Achashverosh? The Gemara answers, Ki Shushan. A walled city must be like Shushan. My Shushan mukefes v'choma mimos ha'Achashverosh. Just as Shushan was surrounded by a wall at the time of Achashverosh, v'korim b'chamish asar, and its residents read the Megillah on the 15th of Adar, Afkal shemukafes choma mimos ha'Achashverosh. So too, any city that was surrounded by a wall at the time of Achashverosh, korim b'chamish asar, the residents read the Megillah on the 15th of Adar. The Gemara turns to the Tan of our Mishnah. The Tana Didan, my time, and what is our Tana's reason for determining the status of a city by the existence of a wall at the time of Yoshua? The Gemara answers, Yalif Paraze. He derives it by meaning of a Gemarah Shava that links unwalled cities that is written here with unwalled towns that is written elsewhere. Now this is another habit or circumstance that the Gemara frequently occupies itself with, something called the Gemarah Shava. Gemarah Shava works like this. You have a sentence with a word in it, and then you have another sentence with the same word in it somewhere else. So what our Chachamim teach us is as follows. From the first sentence, which has this special word, I have a sentence, and inside this sentence is the word special. And this sentence is brought to teach us something. So just as it's this sentence so to teach something, if I have another sentence with the word special in it, I can learn it out the same way I learned the first sentence. This concept of a Gemarah Shava is not something that we are allowed to apply ourselves. In other words, if you go through Chumash and you find two sentences in two places, and each of them have a similar word, we cannot go ahead and create this Gemarah Shava linkage. The point of the Gemarah linkage is to show that we can learn something here from something there. We are not allowed to create that linkage, that Gemarah Shava process. That has to have been done by the earlier Tanoim. There are other methods of learning that we are allowed to use and employ and come up with our own, but a Gemarah Shava is not one of them. So the Gemara continues, and it's learning. It says, Paraze, derives of a means of Gemarah Shava that links unwalled towns. That's written here with unwalled towns that is written elsewhere. Kisif hacha al kain haYehudim haParazim. Here it is written, therefore the Jews of the unwalled towns. Kisif hasam levad me'arei haParazi harbe miod. And elsewhere in Yehoshua is written, besides a great number of unwalled towns. Ma lahalan mimos Yoshua ben Nun, just as there it means a town that was unwalled at the time of Yoshua ben Nun, Afkan mimos Yoshua ben Nun. So here too it means a town that was unwalled at the time of Yoshua ben Nun. The Gemara asks why our Tana disagrees with the view of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha. So the Tana in our Mishnah, and we already spoke about this earlier, we think it may be Rabbi Akiva. Apparently, he has different opinions than Yehoshua ben Korcha. So it's not unusual for two Tanoim to have a machlokas, a disagreement on how to learn out a particular sentence or verse. The Gemara asks why our Tana disagrees with the view of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha. We understand why Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha did not say, as our Tana did, that a city's status is dependent on the existence of a wall in the time of Yoshua. The less lay Parazi, because Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha does not hold of the Gemarah Shava that links unwalled towns to unwalled towns. Elo Tana Dinan Mai, Tama Lo Amar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha. But what is our Tana's reason for not saying, as Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha did, that a city's status is determined by the existence of a wall at the time of Achashverosh, the Gemara expresses surprise at the question. My time, how can one ask, what is our time's reason? It is obvious what his reason is. The ha is lei paraze, for he holds that the Gezer Shava that linked unwalled towns. The Gemara clarifies the question. Hachi kamar. This is what the questioner meant. Ela Shushan, the Avdan Kaman. But according to our Tana, who determines the city's status by the existence of a wall at the time of Yeshua, whose custom does the city of Shushan follow? Lo kifarazim v'lo kemufakin. It is not unlike unwalled cities, and it is unlike walled cities. Shushan is unlike unwalled cities inasmuch as it celebrates Purim on the 15th, but neither can it be classified as a walled city, for it is not known to have a wall at the time of Yeshua. The Gemara answers, Omar Rabba v'amrei la kedei. Rabba said, and some say it was the Amora Kedei who said it, Shani Shushan Hoel v'nasa bones. Shushan is different because a miracle was performed there. The Gemara now questions the view of Rav Yehoshua ben Korcha. Again, Rav Yehoshua ben Korcha is a Tana. He's a different Tana than the Tana of our Mishnah, and he's a Tana who has a Brisa. And as we've repeated and learned, and we shall continue to repeat, a Brisa basically is an uncodified Mishnah. That means when Rav Yehuda ben Nasi took all the Mishnayos and he put them all together, he did not include these particular ones with them.